So, journalism with the boys it's a thing I did, and now we're going to read it, and it's on chapter 1, journalism with the boys, chapter 1, journalism club, DD, which stands for our main character, Dakota Delegar.
Really gonna intro like that? Is journalism with the boys a thing I did? Right, this is the gripping story about 4 boys who spent journalism class together. Find out more right now. Chapter 1.
Journalism with the boys, chapter 1, journalism club. Let's go.
Okay. Just so you know, straight off with the voices here. Good morning, prospective journalism club members. As a reminder, we have our first journalism club meeting tomorrow, 9:22. We will start at 3:30, but don't feel bad if you show up a little late. At our first meeting, we will be talking about your future plans for the club, as well as choosing officer positions. Don't forget to invite your friends. See you tomorrow, Mr. Harlow. Dakota packed his bag as soon as the professor let them loose. The first club meeting was starting in 5 minutes, and within that time he'd have to book it across the campus and figure out where room 3B was. Despite going to community college for 2 years already, he didn't know much about this campus. He preferred to take the online classes, and his few in-person classes hadn't been in the same building as 3B. After tossing on the strap of his messenger bag and patting his pockets for his phone and keys, Dakota skedaddled out of the computer lab. When he exited the building, he was hit with a blast of cool air. It wasn't winter yet, but that didn't stop the weather from trying to freeze him to death. Dakota booked it across the massive parking lot that connected the 3 buildings on campus. He had to keep an eye out, not only for stray vehicles, but also for the forming potholes and trash haphazardly forgotten by students. The college wasn't very well funded, but it was affordable, and Dakota had coasted along on financial aid so far. It was his final year here, thank God. Some of these teachers had really tried his patience, and navigating his old car through the overcrowded parking lot was a challenge of its own. Dakota had to balance both a full-time job and a full roster of classes. He did not have time for this club. The only reason he came to this meeting in the first place was because the teacher had asked. One of Mr. Harlow's other students had been hounding him about making one, but few students had shown interest. Mr. Harlow was one of the few instructors Dakota had enjoyed having, and he was also Dakota's academic advisor. So when he had asked, explaining his need for more than one club member, Dakota felt obligated to say yes, at least for one meeting. When he entered the building, Dakota had to scrutinize a map mounted in the foyer. After pinpointing the incredibly tiny 3B on the map, he had to check another map further down the hall to make sure he was going in the right direction. The building was not laid out in an easily navigable way, with halls meandering in strange directions and tiny cramped halls leading off here and there. Eventually, he finally found the offending 3B with the door invitingly open and steady chatter coming out. Mr. Harlow was sitting on his desk at the other end of the class, talking to 2 students sitting at a front table. Halfway to the back of the class was another student, who only gave him a sour glance before brooding over his phone. Mr. Harlow turned as Dakota entered and gave him a warm smile and greeting. "Dakota, so glad you could make it." "Hello," he greeted, giving a wave to the other students. Dakota decided to sit at the table across from the other 2, so as to not stretch out the group too much. Mr. Harlow checked his watch before glancing at the door and clapping his hands together. "Okay, why don't we get started now? We've got a lot to talk about, and we can still welcome in any other stragglers. Why don't we introduce ourselves first?" He closed the door partially before taking a seat back on the corner of his desk and sizing up the group. No one spoke up. "I'll introduce myself first," he announced. "I'm Mr. Harlow. I'm on the board of directors, and I teach most of the English and creative writing classes. I like to play video games in my spare time, and I decided to host a journalism club because I used to love the old one we had going before it died out a few years ago. He then gestured to one of the two kids he had been talking to earlier, a real tall and broad fellow. Hugo, why don't you go next? Tell us something about yourself and why you decided to join the journalism club. The student, Hugo apparently, looked a bit startled for a moment before finding his voice. I'm Hugo Vandier. I'm part of the video game club and I'm going for a journalism degree, which is why I decided to join the club, he explained curtly. The student next to him quickly spoke up, almost bursting with excited energy. How the tiny guy held in so much eagerness was unknown.
Hey, I'm Courtney.
He turned in his seat to give Dakota and the emo kid a friendly wave before continuing.
I'm a part of the art club, Civitan, and also the gaming club with Hugo. I joined because he asked me to, but also because journalism seems pretty fun.
After his introduction, everyone's attention turned to Dakota, so he straightened up a bit and spoke. My name's Dakota. I don't have much time for clubs because I spend most of my time not at school working. I came to the meeting because Mr. Harlow asked, and I wanted to show my support. I've never done journalism before, but I imagine it could be interesting. The spotlight was quickly swept away from him to the angry guy in the back, now slouched in his seat and his chin resting in his palm.
I'm Jack, and I joined because I need extra credit.
Eloquent, Dakota thought. Mr. Harlow seemed to think the same thing with the grimace on his face, but he quickly wiped the expression away and stood, Okay, why don't we talk about what to expect from the club? Mr. Harlow then went on to talk about what the club usually did and events they could attend. Apparently, the clubs would basically compete among each other. Whoever had the most service hours spent working at community service type events, would win money to put towards future club events. Mr. Harlow talked about trunk or treat, bake sales, and other events the club could attend to pass out pamphlets and such. None of it seemed too interesting to Dakota, though the other students seemed enraptured. He then started talking about more specific things the club would do, creating some sort of journal for the college featuring student work and talking about significant events from throughout the year, attending more official college events like graduation and seminars to record what happened, interviewing people, all stuff Dakota had more anticipated the club to do. Eventually, it came time to choose officer positions. Would anyone like to be president? Mr. Harlow asked, fingers poised above his laptop keyboard. Everyone turned towards Hugo, but suddenly, the grumpy dude from the back of class spoke up with a simple,
Me?
The club looked at him, silent for a moment. Mr. Harlow eventually spoke up. Anyone else want to try competing for the position? Hugo? Hugo shook his head. Nah, I don't really want to be president. I'm already president of the gaming club, and I want to give someone else the opportunity. No one else, then? Harlow asked, and when no one responded, he typed out Jack's name on his computer. Okay. Vice President? No one spoke up for a moment until Courtney said,
Dakota should try.
Why? Dakota asked, a little taken aback by the suggestion.
You're good in public speaking, and you look like an actual reporter. You'll be great.
Courtney elaborated. Dakota grimaced. He didn't really appreciate his business casual being compared to like a reporter. Maybe the position would be better suited for Hugo. He seems more invested. Hugo quickly shook his head. I think you should be vice president. Dakota rubbed a thumb against his temple. Was he really going to do this? Ugh. Yeah, okay. All right. And secretary? Harlow asked. Courtney immediately piped up.
Me!
Hugo, would you like to be treasurer then? Or would you like to challenge him for secretary? Mr. Harlow asked. I'm fine as treasurer, Hugo confirmed. Mr. Harlow finished typing on his computer before getting up and sitting on his desk again. He explained the duties of their positions, and thankfully, Dakota didn't have to do much. He mostly just had to do the president's job if they weren't there, and do basic second-in-command stuff. Dakota originally didn't want to come back. He just wanted to come to the first meeting or two, then drift away without another word. But he was vice president now, and he had his duties. He wasn't just going to abandon his responsibilities like some low-life wretch. After the meeting, in his shitty old car, Dakota let his head thump back against the headrest of the driver's seat. Yet more responsibilities weighing on him, on top of his school and job. Hopefully, this wouldn't be too pressing on his life. Maybe it could just play as some background noise to everything else. He started up the car, turning the heat on right away to warm up the chilly interior. He flicked on his lights, then pulled out of his parking lot to head home. I'm gonna make it through this year, if it kills me.
Yay! That was chapter 1.
Yay! We did it. We did it.
Yay! It was
our first attempt as well. Can you believe it?
Oh yeah. No other attempts.
No, not at all.
All right.
Oh.
All right. What did we think about this chapter overall?
I thought this was a really, really strong chapter to start out on. I think one of the things that you're really good at doing is sort of opening up stories. I think back to one of your older stories, Of the Stars, and
Which does
I
not
remember
exist.
just
Don't
how
look it up.
Don't look it up. And I find it was even though I wasn't that interested in the sort of type of story that it was, after reading the first chapter, I was hooked in, and I feel like I get that exact same feeling reading this first chapter. You do a really good job of like just introducing characters like straight away, and also setting the scene. I feel like one of the hardest things to do in like writing a story is the first chapter, because you know how do you start off, you know? So
Yeah.
to see that you've put in you know, the note giving the sort of setting that, you know, inviting people to journalism club, and then introducing the main character Dakota going on his way to journalism club, I feel like really sets the scene for one of like the glue that ties this story together, which is the journalism club.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very
the
sweet
name.
of you.
It's very sweet of you to be so good at writing.
The first chapter is always like the one you agonize over most, because you're like, okay, I gotta make sure everyone knows what's up and who's what and who's where and what this fucking story's about. And I think this one was particularly easy because it's just like in the real world. It's not fantasy or anything. They're not talking animals or some bullshit. They're just like people, and they're going to college, and now they're in journalism club, and that's basically what's up.
Yeah, there's a lot less context
Yeah.
that you need to learn as a reader, because, you know, if you wanted context for the world that Dakota lives in, you need to only look around you, you know?
Yeah.
There's nothing special about the world, you know? It's just a story of a dude going to journalism club. So
Yeah.
that certainly helps a lot.
Yep. All right. Now, going off of just the chapters we've read, which is just chapter 1, what do you think about the characters so far?
Characters so far, wow. I feel like we learned a lot about Dakota very quickly. He seems kind of overbearing,
Get his ass.
very quick to take on like additional responsibilities, which may or may not become an issue later on. But
Maybe.
he also seems quite curt and maybe uptight a little bit, which you know, it's a trait that I certainly relate to a little bit. At least when I was younger, I was certainly a lot like Dakota, I feel.
Oh yeah, because you are Dakota. I forgot. I'm sorry. I just put you in the story.
That's right. I am literally Dakota.
Yeah, this is my boyfriend Dakota. Yeah.
Yeah, nice to meet you. That's why he sounds like me.
Of course.
You know?
Yeah, he has an Irish accent.
Anyways, Mr. Harlow seems. I can't get a lot out of Mr. Harlow at the moment. You know, he seemed obviously, you know, looking at it structurally, you know, or pragmatically, Mr. Harlow seems like, you know, he has a use of bringing Dakota somewhere. It's hard to see, you know, a personality behind obviously his purpose as a teacher of holding journalism club and so on. So it'll be interesting to learn a little bit more about him. Um, you know, aside from his brief speech about him playing video games, you know, like what kind of video games does he play? I bet he plays some like sweaty video games, like really sweaty video games.
To be fair, he's basically like a fucking NPC. He's like, okay, he is the person who stands at this desk in this room, and he says stuff. He doesn't really
He's
get
a
a
plot
lot.
device.
Yeah. How dare he?
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. As for the other four characters that was introduced, we have Jack, who I very quickly see as sort of the troublemaker
The bitch.
in the group.
Yeah.
He seems like he could possibly be maybe the villain of the story.
Ooh.
Potentially, because obviously he seems so standoffish against everyone else. You have Hugo, who there's nothing really to talk about with Hugo, to be honest.
He's just a guy.
Yeah, he does just seem like just a guy. It's hard to get an understanding of what makes him different to, you know, anyone really. But I'm sure we'll find out, you know, what makes Hugo soon enough. Courtney, in contrast, is quite easy to get a hold of very quickly. Seems like this optimistic, positive, emotional
friendly
dude who's very, very friendly, and you can get that sort of understanding really quickly, not just, you know, from your description of him as the narrator, but also, you know, the way he speaks, the way he was so quick to praise Dakota's skills in one of the other classes, you know, which most people, you know, wouldn't bring up such an upfront, hey, you're good at this, I think you should, especially to
someone they don't really know.
I would assume. Exactly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't assume that they know each other very well, if at all. So
yeah, Dakota didn't even know his name. He didn't even know his name.
Yeah, that kind of sells it out a little bit. But even if Dakota didn't know his name, we all know his name now. He's very, very easy to you know, get a hold of, and Courtney certainly stands out from the bunch for sure. So that's my thoughts on them.
Cool. I guess that's it. I don't have much else to say.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, any final thoughts on this first chapter?
Any final thoughts? I already spoke about how gripping I find like this chapter is, like a way of like bringing you into the story. I remember we spoke about me thinking that you used the line Dakota booked it.
I did.
Twice.
I did.
You did.
I did. I realized it when you were reading it. Let's see. Book. Yeah, it's using the first chapter, the first paragraph in the third paragraph.
Yes. He'd have. I find it.
Yeah.
In like the second sentence, the first club meeting was starting in 5 minutes, and within that time, he'd have to book it across campus, and then and these are short paragraphs, mind you. Dakota booked it across the massive parking lot. It felt weird to me.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it. I didn't even realize it until like you were reading it this time. And I'm like, oh fuck, he was right. It's too late to fix now.
Yeah. So I suppose any sort of comments for something to think about is obviously maybe slightly different, because I mean it's not that big of a deal,
Yeah.
but it did feel a bit weird to me when I was reading it the first time, though I couldn't quite place it. Just using book it
Yeah.
twice. Anyways, that was the only sort of comment I had for this chapter. I was really happy with this chapter for an
Thank
opening.
you.
So that's all I have to say about it.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. I love you.